Let's let the party begin. Okay, so we're joining the two mini-comps, OpenGov and OpenStack. We don't know what that means. I'll be your host for the day. My name is David Flanders. You can find me on DFF Flanders. If you do want me to ask a question to the panels, I've got my little tablet on me here or my large phone. You can tweet me and let me know that question. Otherwise, we're going with the hands-up sort of method. If you're really desperate, you just kind of shake your hand more and I'll run over and we'll keep the conversation going. We're going to try to keep it fast and quick. But let's first introduce our panelist. Ross from Agimo, could you just give a big wave of hands? There we go. Tristan Good over on this side. Dennis Jorgensen. Dennis, you're from which organization?
Uber Global.
Uber Global, thank you. Oh yes, it's right down there. Tom Fiffield from Nectar. Yes, right there. And Jessica Smith, right there. Okay, so here's the argumentative question. Should the Australian government be adopting OpenStack and provide that for all of their departments? To get us going, to get us going, we're going to have someone argue for and against to try to lay out the issue, and then we're going to explore it and see what comes of it. And if we want to go down some other random path, we can do that as well, so don't be afraid to do that. Okay, so first off, Josh is going to give us the for-argument. Josh, stand up, give us, within kind of 30 seconds, the key, elevator pitch for why this is valuable.
So I didn't get an intro because I need no introduction. One of the fathers of OpenStack, which we built at NASA and ran for the White House, the USAspending.gov federal budget transparency, the original open government effort for the US government, was our alpha customer before we actually even called it OpenStack, a long time before. And if that hadn't worked, OpenStack would not exist. So I would say OpenStack was actually built for exactly this purpose. If the Australian government can't use it, we need to change what OpenStack is until you can.
Fantastic, well done. Okay, so Ross, you're going to give us the rebuttal. No pressure, go ahead and stand up and give it to us as you will.
Okay, devil's advocate, folks. Governance of ICT is devolved back to an agency level here in Australia, and agencies have the autonomy to determine their ICT requirements on an agency-by-agency basis. The head of the agency has that responsibility, and I think it's fraught with danger to, in some cases, to mandate at a very high level the use of given technologies or products.
We remember IE, I think, all quite well. So, yeah. All right, over to the audience. Let's get things going. Who's going to throw out the first question? Fire it up there. And I'm going to run around today, so you're going to see me sweat.
So probably less of a question, but so I don't think there was any term there saying mandate, but why don't you simply provide it as a service, and then if it fits people's needs, then they use it. And I assume what usually happens is people find it really useful and it takes off. So I think forcing people to do anything is not a clever idea. And the other thing that you should do is not only go for OpenStack, try other technologies, because you don't want to embed yourself in one thing. Although I'm an OpenStack developer, it doesn't make sense to totally buy into one thing.
I'm actually going to ask Tom to answer that question, because Tom was part of a government-funded project funded to the 47 million, I believe. Tom, what happened where you guys had to make that decision? You looked at several products. Give us your perspective.
Indeed. So Nectar is a $47 million project thanks to the Super Science Initiative out of the Department of Innovation. And basically in March 2011, we needed to make a decision on what middleware was going to be used for a cloud for the research sector. And we had about 5 or 6 options that we looked at seriously. Eucalyptus, Open Nebula, what is now CloudStack, and those kind of offerings. And one of the key factors which led us to make the decision of OpenStack was the fantastic community around it, which really meshed well with our aims. And we could easily see where the development direction was going and influence it in ways where it met with our objectives.
Anyone on the panel want to respond? Dennis, having advised, do you want to give, Dennis, actually, do you want to give a little bit of context why you are sitting on this panel and how you've advised government on these aspects?
Well, look, so we're a service provider, and we take the view the customer's right. So, to a large extent, within bounds, whatever the government so our company is about 50-50 commercial, or so what we call small business and individuals, and 50% enterprise. Of our enterprise gig, about 60% is government, about 40% is commercial. So, overall, in terms of revenue, our government business is about 30 to 35%. What we are seeing is the world, in terms of what was cloud or on the web, traditionally was very heavily Linux. So we kind of see the world in kind of, along a couple of different axes. One of those axes is what we call ecological versus biological. It's not an industry term, but we kind of think of it like every organisation's a little amoeba swimming in the pond of the economy. And even if you're a government agency, you ingest a lot of dollars in the form of taxes, and you actually push a lot of dollars into the economy in the form of either policies or grants or funding different initiatives. So as a government organisation, you might think of yourself as an economic player, but in reality you're a very, very strong, large economic player. So the systems we see, we break up for ourselves are ecological and biological. Ecological systems are those things that allow the organisation to interact with its environment. So traditionally websites, emails, those sorts of things. Biological functions are those things that allow the organisation to survive itself, the sort of IT equivalent of the mitochondrial DNA, if you will. And those sorts of things traditionally, in most organisations, have been very Microsoft based. And so what we are seeing anyway is things pushed to the cloud tend to replicate the internal biological systems that exist now, and therefore there is a strong Microsoft bias to the things that are coming into the cloud. So over the last 2 years, we've shifted from maybe a 95% kind of Linux open organisation to about a 35-65 Microsoft v Linux. And that's not because of any particular policy or not any particular religious zeal on our behalf. It's just what our customers are looking for right now. So whether it's right or wrong, I can't say. All I can say is what we're seeing is mostly Microsoft stuff predominantly is turning up in the cloud compared to OpenStack, Linux, etc. And I think that's driven because people are replicating what they have internally with what's happening externally. Now, whether that's the way it should be in the future, I can't tell. All I can tell you is what we're seeing now.
So maybe the question should have been, why don't we just get the entire government department sector? Surely, Josh or Tristan, you have something to say about that. Tristan, do you want to say something? Because Tristan, I believe he almost compared you to an amoeba in the... So Tristan is head of Aptera. He's also a board member of the OpenStack Foundation, a great accolade. And more importantly, you are an Australian businessman. You're trying to increase the gross national product. So tell us about why they should be considering this.
Well, the problem with if we're going to look at Azure to try and fill this role, you get what you're given. Coming back to looking at OpenStack, you get what you want. And I agree with Angus as well, saying before, I don't think we're looking at a mandated policy to use OpenStack, but I think one of the things that occurs to me that possibly there should be some guidelines there, because there must be a lot of duplication across all these different departments trying to pick their own cloud or their own infrastructure and all that sort of thing. So by having a very loosely coupled framework that OpenStack provides, you've got flexibility to start at the top, provide a great set of tools that can be adapted far more than something like Azure, or pretty much I can't think of any other platform that would be as flexible.
Okay, I want to push to Jessica real quick to top it out. As the resident citizen on the panel, what you actually think of this? Do you care which platform gets adopted? Is it going to help you in your day-to-day? Do you see it as cost savings? What do you think about the cloud and actually being used inside a government?
Well, I guess I'm here, as kind of the every person, the citizen kind of perspective. I may not quite fit that role exactly because obviously I'm an IT professional as well. My background is in sysadmin and ISPs and a little bit of web dev and those sorts of things. And I have a strong interest, which I would hope everyone does, in data privacy, data security, and the intersection of that and government policy. And I think the systems that we use to deliver government initiatives are really critical to that, and that they need to actually be, as they say, aligned with the mission or aligned with the ideology of the government. And I want to see efficiencies. I don't believe in the willy-nilly slashing, slash everything, and that's how we save costs. I want to see lack of duplication of effort, as you're saying. To me, it makes absolute sense that, and I find this in my day job. I work in the ActGov at the moment. I'm babysitting a school network and work with other ITOs, and one of the things I've been agitating for is an ability to share information, leverage information, and not reinvent the wheel every time someone comes across the same problem. And I see, these kind of stack solutions as something that can actually solve that problem once and then replicate, to everybody. And I don't want to see 6 different government departments or 20 or 50 different government departments each going through their own discovery process with their own agendas and so forth. And everyone likes to think they're special, and everyone is special, but they're not that special. The needs are pretty similar right across the board. And, maybe for various reasons you can't say this is the anointed provider, but you can certainly say we've gone to the market, and at the moment we've settled upon these 2 or these 3 solutions which we think will deliver the outcomes that we need to deliver, and we're going to integrate those into our offerings, our service offerings, because we are a service delivery organisation, and we actually facilitate the various departments being able to do their job. And I've had scenarios where our school wanted to do something fairly simple, put up a database to manage and monitor stuff. And for various reasons that are too hilarious to go into, they were sold on a SharePoint solution from an external vendor. And there was no real way, even if that was the solution that was the right solution for the job, it wasn't. Anyway, there was no real facility for that to be delivered by the Department of Education out to a school. And I think that's a real lack in capability in government if you don't have the infrastructure. And whether, obviously the regulatory issues are those, we don't want to host in the US maybe, we don't want to be subject to the Patriot Act, we don't want to be any of these things. So fine, bring it in-house, but provide it as a service. And, everything becomes a service effectively, and you get all of the benefits of leveraging volume purchasing, you get all of the data center leveraging benefits, and you get repeatability, you get consistency, and you get scalability. To me, those things seem like a no-brainer.
Yep.
And I don't have any investment, unlike some on the panel, obviously, as whether that solution is OpenStack or something else. I would like to see it not be just Microsoft, if it's going to be Microsoft.
So I like the question. Let's actually ask the audience. So what we're going to try to do is we're kind of halfway through of the panel discussion, and what I want to push into is whether or not this is going to actually change your mind. So you've kind of heard the panelists' initial view. So what I'd like is just a quick straw poll. We're going to take a vote, and I'd like you to vote on whether, yes, you do think government should adopt OpenStack to be able to utilize across their departments, or no, you don't, right? So we're going to make it binary, but don't worry, because at the end, we're going to take the vote all over again and see if any of your minds have changed. So with that said, does everybody, give me kind of shake a head. Do you know definitively? Some people? Some people know. Okay. Who says, go on, Sina?
Just a quick question. In terms of Azure, there's no actual Azure infrastructure in Australia, so all that data gets shipped overseas to Singapore.
So Sina's just saying there's no Azure efforts, but that's not what we're going to vote on. We're going to vote on OpenStack. So who thinks that OpenStack the government should be using OpenStack? By show of hands, yes. Keep your hands up, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, okay, about 55, 60 is what I count. Who thinks no, definitively they should not be using OpenStack? They should not demand that. Stand proud, that's absolutely right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's what I like to see. Now, of course, we're going to see if we can switch that. You go, okay, you're very happy. We're done. Sit back down.
All right, let me take this from 2 pieces. The first one being this intersection of, is it a policy question, and is it about data privacy and data ownership? How many of you in the room, I think most of you are IT professionals, how many of you support a token ring network today?
Show of hands. Token ring network, hands up.
I believe you, sir, are lying. No, that would be 1.
It gets turned off very shortly.
Awesome. How many of you believe it would be appropriate for the government to procure a net new network today that was token ring? Okay, I think you're lying too. The point here is that the beautiful thing about Ethernet, although I think Roddy would object to my use of the term Ethernet, I've been recently educated, but I'm going to use it anyway, is that you can use Ethernet to build private networks and public networks. So selecting Ethernet is not a selection of where is your network going to exist or who owns your network, but simply what protocol and what technology is being used. That is the best feature of OpenStack for government. That is why we built it that way at NASA. We did not build it that way because we wanted other people to host our data, which is impossibly illegal for NASA in most use cases, ditto for the White House, but simply because we wanted to be able to connect private clouds and public clouds together. And the best analogy I can use is many of us would rent tuxedos. In fact, I'm probably the only one who owns their own tuxedo. Nobody rents underwear.
And on that point, we got a question up top here. Go on.
Your Ethernet analogy is absolutely brilliant, and maybe one of the reasons why you start to reconsider OpenStack. Let's go back 15 years ago. So we made a joke about token ring, and yes, I work in an organisation that has a 2-node token ring network that connects the back of a router to an IBM mainframe. You know who's responsible for that monstrosity that we had to buy spare parts off from eBay? The Commonwealth Department of Defence. So, 15 years ago, if we wanted to build a large wide area network or a large campus network, like the campus we're sitting in, do you know what everyone was going to build it on? Not Ethernet, it was on ATM. Oh my God, who in this room thinks that ATM is going to be the network that we would actually build right now for some large enterprise? Hands? No. Right, so OpenStack. OpenStack may be awesome, OpenStack may be brilliant, and when OpenStack forks into OpenStack and FooStack, which way do we go? Oh my God. So the issue I have is when you start to get down towards mandate or creation of preferred technologies, the gentleman from Regino is dead right. What we'll end up with is, because the Commonwealth Department of Defence occupies 50% of the Commonwealth Government's IT spend, what we wind up is whatever the hell the CIO from the Department of Defence wants, which means we'll all be using ATM, or the cloud equivalent of it, in 15 years' time. There will be no innovation. You won't be having a let's use OpenStack discussion, because damn it, we're all using something else. So your example about Ethernet is exactly right. Making these big technology picks isn't necessarily a smart idea for whole of government, because we're not smart enough.
Okay, let's dig into that exact point, because OpenStack's had this criticism, right? And you know, maybe you've changed the minds of our 60-some people, which is exciting. But you guys have been threatened with the fact that you do have all these companies on board the board. Josh, Tristan, you guys should be talking about this. Can we trust you? Can we trust the companies that are sitting on top of OpenStack? Is that going to split? Are we running into danger if we consider this?
So the idea of a fork in an open source project, especially one like OpenStack where it's Apache 2 licensed, so there's no GPL that's making sure everyone plays nice. The best comparison we have is probably nuclear weapons, right? Forking OpenStack is a nuclear bomb. We have mutually assured destruction. Who's going to fork OpenStack? Who could possibly? I mean, we thought about it. Honestly, I thought about it a year and a half ago. There was a moment in OpenStack's history where there was enough of us who were unhappy with governance at the time that we said, is it time? That moment has passed. The only moment where OpenStack could have been forked without just mutually assured disruption is long past. There is nobody who could pull it off. There are too many people with too much invested in that community for any portion of the community to leave.
Go on, Jessica.
Is that a good thing? I mean, we're all over.
Your weapon was a good idea. Like, mutually assured destruction is never not a good thing.
We might go into metaphor land a little bit too much, but go on, Jessica. Tell us your opinion on that.
I wonder if that's a good thing. I mean, and again, you know, I guess playing devil's advocate, you know, most of us here are invested in open source, and the fact that if a project no longer meets our needs, but it has a good base to it, we can fork it and we can take it where we want it to do. If you have a project that, whilst being pretty much open source, from what I understand, is effectively not forkable, that means that, you know, as you said, in 15 years' time, we end up with something that really is something that doesn't fit anybody's needs and has gone in that direction, and now we can't fork it. So I'm not sure that I'd be selling that as a positive of OpenStack. I'm not sure whether it's a negative, but...
Okay, so I want to move us into a different lane, because we can talk about the forking thing all day long and the virtues of open source splitting and all the rest of it. But what I do want to talk about, since we do have such a large audience participation saying yes, let's pretend we are in that place. And maybe, Tom, you can kick us off, because you're actually 2 years down the road where you've basically got every university using OpenStack across the board. Give us good and bad. Don't just tell us it's, it just works. Tell us good and bad of what happens if an entire sector does adopt OpenStack.
Indeed. So one of the first points to note, I'll start with a point which could be either good or bad depending on your perspective, is that OpenStack is under very, very, very rapid development. And that means the difference between releases is quite severe. That means you have to put in a lot of staff time just to keep up with what's going on in OpenStack. That can be a bad thing if you're staff limited. At the same time, the rate of innovation is high. You're always getting new features coming in, and it's always improving. So that's an interesting point. But just to jump back onto the general question, which is if we are in this situation, what's another good thing? I think there is a good thing here which is unrelated to the technology choice, and something that we've definitely seen in the research sector with our deployment of OpenStack is the sysadmins start talking to each other. They start sharing deployment experiences very widely, very broadly. We have people in South Africa contacting us and asking us for deployment advice. We have universities who are not involved in our project who are looking at building their own private OpenStack clouds just because they've seen what we've done. And I think this whole openness in the OpenStack project starts to rub off on people after a time.
Ross, Dennis, I'd like you to respond to it. So, and I know you guys are thinking widely about this and hard, so I know you can't lay it down, but what if you did adopt OpenStack? You know some of the cost-saving arguments behind having a centralized system, about sharing sysadmin rather than every department having another sysadmin. What are your thoughts when you start to think about, well, what if we did encourage, maybe not mandate, but encourage a use of a certain system, like we would encourage, making sure to procure open source on things? What are your thoughts on that?
I guess kind of my view of the government from looking outside in is it's a relatively risk-adverse organisation, so I don't think there's any surprise there. The guys who make the decisions, higher up guys and girls, succeed by not failing. They often don't succeed by succeeding. They succeed and get their next job because they did a reasonable job, which means they didn't fail in their current engagement. So taking a leap to a new technology and a new methodology, especially something that's open source and is not supported by an organisation that's making $50 billion a year, it's a fairly risky thing from their perspective if you're sitting high in an organisation. So again, I'm not saying whether OpenStack or open source or whatever is right or wrong. I'm saying that if you believe this is a technology, then you need a champion and someone who will take that risk and demonstrate it succeeds, and then I'm certain others will follow. The second point I'd make is in regards to the university sector, there's a very strong, obviously, not-for-profit motivation. You're fighting against a large ecosystem of providers, and we're one of them, who have exactly the opposite motivation. So it's not in their interests necessarily to create and empower a technology that is low cost and free and has very, very low barriers to entry. It's actually, in many providers' best interest to do the opposite thing. So in regards to pushing it through, from a practitioner level, you might be saying, well, I can't understand why anyone would say no. From a management perspective, you've got a class of people who are afraid of innovating because they might fail, in which case their career ends, or certainly goes in a direction they're not interested in, plus a very large vendor community that's not interested in seeing an open source or OpenStack solution succeed. So if you believe it needs to succeed, then within the organisation there needs to be someone identified as a champion who can take it forward and make it succeed, and that would be the thing that would give it the momentum to push through those boundaries.
Ross,
just from service provider view.
Sorry, Ross, do you want to?
The current guidance in the government's cloud strategy we identified, which is the Australian Government Cloud Computing Strategic Direction Paper of April 2011, we identified community clouds as being a desirable outcome. We developed a better practice guide, which is available on the Agemo GovDex, on the blog for Agemo, and I'd recommend reading that. There's a space or there is a place for OpenStack within the federal government, and we see that the agencies are the best placed individuals to determine how appropriate the use of it is.
So I'm going to push you a bit more on it,
Yep.
right? So I know there's a paper, there's always a policy we can reference online. I work for government, so I know this.
Yeah.
But what are the future plans? I know you want good things for the community. I know you want to push government into that new space and new innovation, and you're always fighting against the battle of risk. What's the next step for Agemo? Is it another paper to try to push into that, or is it exemplars? What's your thinking? I know you guys have got something up your sleeve coming up soon.
It's all of those things, Dave. The Prime Minister on the 5th of December at the Digital Economy Forum in Sydney identified that the current cyber white paper would be broadened into the digital economy white paper. The Department of Broadband, Senator Conroy, is responsible for the delivery of that. That will be sometime early this year that will be developed. Within that, there is a national cloud computing strategy that will be developed in a very short time frame as well. Department of Broadband again is the lead on that. We will assist them with the component that addresses the government use of that, which reflects $5 billion spend annually, roughly, at the moment. I think.
Yep, that's good. I know you guys are making a move on it, so I definitely wanted to give you the opportunity. Over to the audience. We've gone, who's got another pertinent? Yep, we got one over there. You got a microphone?
While you're running up there, I'll make a comment on policy. My co-founder at Piston Cloud was involved in developing the U.S. government Cloud First policy. And there was a side effect of that policy that I think was really useful and not expected, which is when you set aside a policy that says, we're not saying you have to use cloud, we're saying you have to tell us why you're not using cloud in every single case. Every time they document that, they have given you the feature request for the next version of OpenStack. And that's a really useful byproduct if you end up with a policy that says, it's okay if you're not using cloud, but tell us why not. Because it may be that you don't understand what we have, or it may be that actually you need us to deliver something else.
Over here.
So it's a general question for us to reflect on the case. The question is it a good use of taxpayers' money to employ proprietary virtualization or cloud technologies in government agencies, sending piles of money overseas in licenses and services, when there are suitable open source technologies available and also local companies who can support those technologies? Is it sensible?
Go on. Tristan, I want you to talk about it because you're a small founding. Give us the impassioned speech.
Everyone's heard of the brain drain and the amount of companies and things that are going to the States, and I fully agree with what you say. I mean, we see the ability to develop OpenStack-based solutions here in Australia as one part of reversing the brain drain. Simple as that. I mean, it does keep the commerce within Australia. Microsoft is a very wealthy company. We can build our own wealthy companies here around OpenStack.
So I want to put that, Jessica, talk to us some about, because this is important, right? You don't want it in the United States because why? The Patriot Act. We do not want that data, and that's Tom can...
As John says, you must always maintain ownership of your data. That's certainly an important factor, and certain companies will come to Australia and say, well, we can offer you a local contract and all this sort of stuff, and there's still, it's a grey area. Who wants to be the test case?
Indeed. Jessica, talk to us about the way you feel about that. Is it putting this? I know you're not a citizen. I know you're a techie, but give us the citizen viewpoint on how people would think about that sort of privacy issue. Do you care about it? Do you care if your data is sitting over in the States and subject to that, or what's your thoughts?
If I'm being honest, and I'm putting on the hat of what I see around me as the average citizen, I don't think that it even occurs to them to think about the issues of data privacy and security. I see so many people on Facebook just leaving everything open. I mean, as server admins, it's like, you deny everything and you selectively allow. And this is what is drilled into us, and this is how we think about privacy in the technical sphere, and also it bleeds, of course, into the personal sphere as well. So not only do I not want government data and health records and all sorts of things to be subject to the big boogeyman of the Patriot Act, I also don't necessarily want it subject to unreasonable access by our own. Well, we don't have TLAs here. We have like four LAs: the ASIO and the ACES and so forth. So I think it's the issue of access to data and privacy of data is not solved simply by keeping it onshore, but it streamlines the regulatory environment. But I honestly think that that the average person isn't aware of these issues, and maybe part of the problem is we actually need to find a way to cut through in a way that kind of gives an analogy that they can understand. The discussion I have time and time again with friends who are non-techies is kind of evangelizing about why you should lock down your Facebook profile and why you should be careful about information you put into forms, and why maybe if a company is requesting a certain bit of information, you decide whether they actually need that information, and if they don't, whether or not you put a truthful answer into it, or any of those kind of things. The general thing is, well, I don't have anything to hide, or no one is going to care about me, and of course that's not really the point in the bigger issue. So I think it solves some of the problems by keeping it in-house, but then you still have obviously regulatory constraints.
Absolutely.
On that.
Tom, talk to us a little bit about your use case and what you've dealt with. What do researchers think about this issue of keeping their data in the cloud and sovereignty of data and whatnot?
So we've got a broad spectrum of responses, actually. We have a ton of researchers who come up to us and say, why aren't you just paying for me to use Amazon? And they're completely happy with that, even if it's a health-based project. We've had some people like that. Then there are others who are, at the same time as using our cloud, getting very involved in the OpenStack community, which I think is fantastic. One of the other things I wanted to throw out there just briefly, because I'm not sure it made it into this room, is a stat I learned from one of Josh's presentations, which is the collective companies working with OpenStack right now has a $3 trillion market capitalization. And there are many, many, many products that you can use, including Piston Cloud, if you don't want to, and Aptera, yeah. If you don't want to be involved in this open source thing and you need something to sell to your manager as a turnkey solution.
Excellent. I got a question here, just quick. Yep,
following on from that, one of the things you mentioned that people talking about why don't you just pay me to use Amazon? The issue is that if a platform isn't provided for agencies and for departments by the government, it's actually very easy now, and increasingly easy, for people to just do end runs around the IT department altogether. It's trivial to spin up an Amazon instance and dump something up there, and you're kind of sidestepping, bypassing the regulatory requirements. If you get found out and if the lawyers come, that's a problem. But in fact, people are choosing to innovate if they find roadblocks, and people who are kind of that mindset are going to find a solution to the problem that you've asked them to solve. And if you're not providing them the tools to do it, that you can actually manage and kind of bring it all inside the tent, people are just going to go around it to solutions that may not have security that you need, may have regulatory issues, and may be easy but not actually secure.
Question by Tom, rebuttal by Tom, rather, and then we'll come here.
I didn't provide our answer to when people ask that question. And it is a valid question. Definitely researchers are the masters of the workaround. It's amazing what, as a former researcher I can say that. But basically it's about making our solutions better than the other options. And for example, in the research space, we've got a really awesome high performance network. We've got existing data stores. We've got instruments and other infrastructure already hooked up there, and that's a big value proposition.
Absolutely. Sorry. Question here, and then we'll jump back up over that way.
So privacy has traditionally been achieved by secrecy. How do we ensure it in a long-term sort of goal? How do we get privacy? I mean, keeping it in Australia or keeping it in your backyard isn't even sufficient. So how do we go about keeping privacy?
Ooh, Josh, go on.
Again, I'm going to come back to the, don't rent underwear argument here, which is, if you look out at a time scale of 10 years, and I'm going to look like a freak here for a minute, but this is what I do. 10 years from now, everything you're doing today for crypto and thinking, I just encrypted all my data and I stuck it in Amazon and somehow I'm safe. If it's sitting there encrypted, people can still copy it. Yeah, they've copied it encrypted, so they're not reading it today, but sometime in the lifetime of your liability, so let's say you're liable for 10 years or 15 years or 30 years for keeping that data secret. Let's take health data, you're liable for as long as they're alive in a lot of countries. In that time frame, 30 years, the encryption you're using today is useless. So ever trusting somebody else's infrastructure is just not really a good idea. So the idea of something like OpenStack, where any organization can and probably should run a small private cloud themselves for the things that really don't belong on anyone else's infrastructure. And we're not talking about a giant investment. A small deployment of OpenStack is certainly in the same vein of, hey, well, we do happen to own, a couple of servers of our own. If you look at water systems, simplest utility to compare to, most buildings have a hot water heater. We do not deliver hot water as a utility. We deliver water as a utility and we heat it on site. It's a good model for cloud computing as well. And when you have something like OpenStack, you have these private clouds and public clouds built on that same infrastructure.
I do like this analogy. I keep talking about, well, if you look at other infrastructure, right? So airplanes, canal system, railroads, Highways Act, all the rest of it. The government went and provided these things and then allowed so whether or not we aren't even, maybe the question shouldn't be, should government be providing for departments, but should government be providing cloud for all of their citizens? Now that might be a little off the ball. Let's jump over back here onto the corner. Go on.
Yeah, hi there. For a lot of the larger departments, the IT stuff's outsourced. I was just wondering, are you thinking of a model where there's these little islands of cloud islands, if you like, or if it's going to be joined together? And if it's going to be joined together, if it's a certain level of department and above, how do we get around this, well, not get around, how do we follow all the security practices, remembering that even VLANs, which are, I suppose, the network equivalent, much simpler, aren't allowed in certain circumstances. So how's the security done? Is anyone looking at from the technical as well as the policy side?
Ross, I believe you'll be answering that.
There's a few policies out there that deal with it. I think the Gateway Reduction Scheme is an example of the technical aspect of things. I think there's about 120, 140 gateways at the moment. That's being reduced down to 8, and that's a sort of a key intervention point, I think, for the adoption of cloud. Those agencies, lead government agencies with those gateways, it's the natural point to put cloud services in. Look, it also, just coming back a step, it always comes back to agencies doing a risk assessment on the information that they've got. That's the first step that they do, is look at the information, what's the requirements, here's my legislative and regulatory framework that are my constraints, and they assess that. So there's lots of information out there that's public-facing information that should be on the cloud now. That's been our sort of guidance in our policy over the last 2 years. Assess your information. If it hasn't got those privacy or security constraints around it, move it out into the public cloud. A good example of that is data.gov.au, that's run by the Department of Finance. It's already out there on Amazon Web Services, for example. If it's health records, Department of Human Services should be looking at that information, assessing it and sort of saying, can it go into a public cloud, can it go into a private cloud? During their procurement process, they would be looking at the offerings from the cloud service providers and going and interrogating those sort of those vendors or OpenStack, for example, and sort of saying, is it suitable for the appropriate use of that information? It's as fundamental as that. It's not rocket science. It's assessing your information, and is the solution suitable?
Good.
Fit for purpose.
So we've got, I'd love to come to questions, but we've got to actually, I want to let you guys go off and start drinking beer. But nonetheless, more importantly, I want to do a nice summary. We're going to do one last vote with the crowd, and this is your last chance to make your plea. Let's see if it switches over. We had a really dominant vote to say, no, we're not going to wait, we're not going to evaluate, we want to go, we want to do something innovative. Let's see if we've calmed some of the developer spirits down. So, but before we do that, I'm going to go across this way, and I just want you to give me one last sentence, a tweet, if you will, a tweet of why you should actually use OpenStack in government.
I'll quote the Chinese guy who said OpenStack will smash the monopoly of the Western cloud providers, and I think that is a great, it's a bit longer than a tweet, a great endorsement for the international uptake of OpenStack and how it is, you know, it's clear that it is giving everyone an opportunity to build great clouds and provide very flexible solutions anywhere.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tristan. Tom?
Pretty much everything in OpenStack is in the public domain, so just come to an OpenStack meetup, have a look at mailing lists, read some blogs, and make your own decision.
Very tapered. Josh?
The information age is over, and OpenStack is the internal combustion engine of the data age. You can play with steam engines all you want. I mean, that's the branding of my company, but honestly, you should figure out how to drive a car.
Love that. You get the metaphor award, Josh. Fantastic. Jessica?
Well, I'm still platform agnostic, but I think if we're pushing towards data transparency and openness in government, it doesn't make sense to build that on top of platforms that are opaque. And so I really think that government needs to focus on providing the tools to enable people to succeed. And if they're going to fail fast, fail at negligible cost, and lower that barrier of risk so that the consequences are minimised and we can get to the optimal solution as quickly as possible.
I like it. Absolutely. Little round of applause. I gotta wake up. Go on, Deb.
End users and citizens don't care. Government decision makers are scared, and there's a huge entrenched, very powerful vendor base who doesn't want it to succeed. So it may have its place, but I wouldn't bet the farm on it.
Boo. No, just a little round of applause for last but not least, the last word.
If your cloud service has demonstrates value for money and has adequate security, use it.
Too simple. Round of applause for the entire panel, please. So let's take our vote. I am adding a third category, which is need more info undecided. So we'll see which one of you have become Hamlet. So let's take the yes vote for who is still for the government adopting OpenStack. Raise your hands, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. It's come down about 20. Interesting. Okay, who's against it? Against. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and undecided. Yes, we've found a lot more undecided, so I think this side of the table might have done their job. All those papers at Achimo are paying off, aren't they? Absolutely. Okay, one last round of applause for the panel. Thank you, everybody, much. You're dismissed. Go drink beer.